What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of the Backstage Journal podcast. I'm Rhett Shull. If you're new here, welcome. This is a weekly podcast that I do, and it's about all things music and guitar and the people behind all things music and guitar. I feel like I should come up with a better tagline than that, but we're working on it. This is episode 2 of season 2. Thanks, everyone, for the great response on the podcast coming back. Episode 1 was last week with Rod Castro. If you haven't heard that one, you should absolutely go back and check it out. Rod dropped some serious knowledge for anybody that's interested in touring and working as a professional musician, guitar player, whatever. He's got some serious experience out there doing it, and it was a really informative episode. So, like I said, if you haven't done so, go back and check that out. Again, if you're new here, this is a weekly podcast, and you can find it everywhere fine podcasts are downloaded. That's Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, Google Play, on my website, rhettshull.com, under the podcast tab, and on my second YouTube channel, Rhett Shull 2. You can consume the podcast in video form. Anyway, really excited about this week's episode. I've got the one and only Mark Agnesi on. If you don't know Mark, he was pretty much the face of Norman's Rare Guitars, that vintage guitar store out in Los Angeles, through that YouTube channel. And I first heard about him and found out about him through those YouTube videos, the Guitar of the Day videos he did for years. I honestly learned a lot about vintage guitars and everything. As most of you probably know, Mark has now moved on to work for Gibson Guitars. After Gibson went bankrupt last year, the new leadership took over. They brought Mark on to, well, you'll hear in the interview about his role and everything. And yes, we do talk about the Play Authentic thing. It's not the focus of the interview. I was more interested in learning Mark's story and how he got to where he is and kind of his vision of the future of Gibson guitars. But I felt like I needed to bring it up because I wanted to hear his perspective and his side of it. I up until this point, personally hadn't heard his take on the whole thing. And, well, again, you'll hear it in the interview, but that's not all I was interested in talking to Mark about. So there's no voicemails this week, but if you want to leave a voicemail for future episodes, questions, comments, all the above, you can call the Google Voice number 470-222-5851. Leave a voicemail to be played here on the podcast live and addressed by myself and maybe whatever future guests we have on the show. I do want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this episode. That is DistroKid. Now, DistroKid's a really cool service, and I actually reached out to them to sponsor the podcast, specifically the segment at the end of the show, the original song submission. If you don't know about DistroKid, they're a service that essentially handles all of the publishing for your original music to all of the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora. And they have a really cool service where you can split the credit between whoever else was on the session. I'm a big fan of DistroKid. They've sponsored a few things in the past, and I'm actually going to be using their services later this year when I finally get around to putting out my original music. But we'll hear more from them at the end of the episode. For now, let's see. What do we have to play? Oh, yeah. We've got some dates coming up. Noah Guthrie and Good Trouble, Charlotte, North Carolina on February 14th, and then Greenville, South Carolina on February 15th. I'm plugging these shows because they're coming up quick. Normally, we book stuff months and months in advance, but this was kind of a last-minute thing. Pretty much both of those shows are like hometown shows for Noah, so they're going to be a lot of fun, full band. We're playing basically the same set that we played in Holland. But if you all heard that on last week's episode, I won't bore you with it. Instead, I actually just want to go ahead and jump into the interview with Mark. I sat down with him this past week in Nashville at the new Gibson headquarters in downtown Nashville. They're like right there next to the Frist Art Museum, and it's actually a nice new location. So, yeah, we sat down together and had this discussion. So without further ado, here's my chat with Mark Agnesi. Mark, dude, thanks for doing this, man.
Of course, man.
Yeah, this is kind of a last minute thing, but
I only changed the time on you like
it's okay.
7 times.
It's okay.
No one has respect for my calendar.
They
just throw stuff on it. They're like, yeah, he'll be there. It's fine. Put it on his calendar.
It's all right. I have a lot of questions.
Cool.
I actually want to talk about stuff other than guitars, but every time you and I get together, we end up just talking about guitars.
It usually goes there.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So I want to start by asking, where does this all sort of begin for you? Because I first found out about you from the Norm's Rare Guitars YouTube channel. But before that, what led into that? How did you learn about vintage guitars and playing and all that stuff?
It started when I was a kid and I saw Back to the Future and like Marty McFly playing the Red 345 at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. I was like 5 and he was like the coolest character I'd ever seen. And like he played guitar and it's like, oh, shit, like if you're cool, you have to, like, you probably should play guitar.
Right.
And it kind of started there. And then that was like hair band central. CeCe DeVille was a very, very big influence on me. Just because he had all the cool guitars.
Yeah.
And I just begged and begged my parents to buy me a guitar, and like my 6th birthday or something like that, Pops threw down for one, and it went from there.
So you started early, 6 years old.
No, I was definitely interested. My dad worked in radio, so I was always at shows and stuff. So I was already kind of immersed in it, and like, yeah, no, I wanted to be a rock star when I was 5 years old.
What was your first guitar?
It's a black PV Impact 2.
Do you still have it?
I don't. I sold it when I was moving out to L.A. I got rid of all my childhood shredder guitars and stuff. But no, it was an American-made guitar. Like I started on like a USA-made guitar. It was, had a Kahler on it.
Right.
Like a black chrome Kahler.
That's rad.
That's where my love of Kahlers started. But yeah, no, it was, there was some BC Rich guitars in the beginning, Jacksons,
Yeah.
a couple 7-strings. I had a lime green BC Rich Virgin that I bought at a store, which is unfortunately no longer there, in Akron, Ohio, called Musician's Bargain Basement.
Yeah, so Akron, Ohio, it's where you grew up.
Yeah.
And we have a strange connection through Patrick Carney of the Black Keys.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing, and he was at one of the artists I play for. He produced, and he was at our album release show last year, and he came up and he was like, "Oh yeah, I saw you were hanging out with Mark a couple weeks ago. We grew up together."
Yeah.
You guys like literally were in the same.
So my dad was at the radio station, and his dad was at the newspaper in Akron, and they've known each other for like 40 years or something like that. They still go have lunch together.
That's awesome.
Once a month and stuff. And when I was in high school and just starting college and stuff like that, I had a blues group in Akron, and we'd play open for the Black Keys occasionally. This was still like maybe a year or two before the one album really blew up and Rolling Stone did all that, the article on it and all that stuff. But yeah, I remember we did 4th of July together at Lock 3 Park in downtown Akron. God, that was probably in 2003.
Yeah.
2002 or 2003. Yeah, it was the last time I played with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really
Akron,
cool.
Man.
There's something about Akron. My best friend growing up, he was from Akron originally, and his dad his grandfather owned the Chevrolet dealership there in town.
Which one?
Oh, God.
I'm trying to think of all the...
I can't remember the name.
Bob Serpentini Chevrolet?
It could have been. I don't know, but it was one of the Chevy shops in town.
Yeah, very well could have been.
And that was his family. And then, there's something about like Ohio. And every time I go to play in Ohio, it's just, it's a rock.
No, it's a great, dude, Cleveland rocks. It's a great rock, area, Northeast Ohio.
So what brought you to LA?
Well, it was Nashville. I went to Belmont University here for the music business program, but obviously I wanted to be in LA. One of the draws of Belmont was they had this thing called Belmont West, which was like you could go do 1 semester in LA. So me and my friend Josh, who both came down, knew we both wanted to go to LA. So we planned it out that our last semester of senior year, we'd do the LA thing, and we flew back for graduation and immediately flew back and started trying to figure out how the hell we were going to make a living and live in LA.
Were you playing out at the time, like in bands and stuff?
At that point, no, because I was new to town. I still didn't know anybody yet, and I was in school. I was working. I had an internship at Lionsgate in the music supervision department and stuff. I'm like, oh, I could do like a, and I just, this is a little different here. I'm not a desk guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, this is bullshit. I want to play guitar.
Right.
So I figured I'm going to just go get a job at a guitar store, and maybe I'll work my way into the scene and start meeting people and all that stuff. So I started working at a place. It's actually no longer there. All went to shit after I left, apparently. It was called West LA Music, which was a big indie store in LA, and started managing the guitar department there, and it worked.
Yeah.
I started getting plugged in a little bit, and I started picking up sideman gigs, and by a couple years in, I was in 5 bands in LA, and I decided I'm going to go pro.
Right.
But takes a lot of $50 and $75 sideman gigs to pay rent in LA. So that lasted for a little while. And luckily, my beautiful wife, Jackie, with my girlfriend at the time, supplemented a little bit of that. And then that's kind of when I started, Craigslist and stuff, looking for deals, looking for stuff to buy that I could flip.
So that was supplementing your income. Like, you were actively searching. Was it mostly vintage stuff you were looking for, or what?
No, not at that point. See, I still had my friends and my connections at West LA that would give me, I know I would have good prices on stuff.
Right.
And I would do some like wacky eBay moves where I'd go in there and I'd take pictures of stuff on the wall. Like when the Jimmy Page double neck came out.
Right.
Like in one day I sold it on eBay. Like, oh God, I hope it's still there. And I went there, and then I'd ship it out, like just total whack, probably the best way of doing business kind of moves. But I was desperate.
Right.
So I remember when the robot guitars came out. I think the first one of those blue robot guitars I made like $2,500 on. Like they were and then I'm like, I'm going to do a second one. And by that time, like they had already kind of.
Was that the Firebird X?
No, this was the original. Back when it was just a limited run, it was like a Blue Burst Les Paul that had the robot tuners on them, and they were hot for a second. And then if it had just been left at that, it would have probably been like a cool thing. And then,
and then it turned
into like, hey, maybe we should put them on everything. Maybe all the acoustics should have them, which,
my God. Yeah. We can get into that later, but I'm interested, like, how did you learn? Cause when I started watching you on YouTube, 4 or 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, maybe even, you were one of the first people that I saw that really was, Guitar of the Day, just talking about vintage stuff. I learned a ton from watching that channel and watching you.
That was the idea.
Yeah. I mean, learning about, slab board Fenders and Banner era Gibson acoustics and all that kind of stuff. So when did you start really getting into the vintage market and learning your way around that stuff?
On the job training, I knew all the models, which is why Norm gave me the job. Like, he's like, what's that? Or what? And I was just like, oh, that's that. And just went down the road. He's like, oh, okay, you got the job. I'm like, oh, sweet. But like the minute details and flat head screws versus Phillips head screws and forward shifted scalloped X bracing versus rear shifted, and laminated boards and slab boards and all that. Dude, that was all on the job.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody asked me a question, I didn't know the answer to it, I would go find the reference book and I would read about it all night until that would never happen again.
Yeah.
And over the course, I mean, I worked for Norm for 10 years.
Right.
Guitar of the Day was the last, 3.5 years of that. So over the course of the first 5 years, whenever somebody asked me a question I didn't know, I'd go find the answer and then know.
Right.
So by the time I started doing Guitar of the Day, I could just
rattle stuff off,
spew at the mouth.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff about it.
Because I imagine, like the vintage market, at least the most desirable vintage market, is a pretty small window of time from just a handful of manufacturers, Fender, Gibson.
We're talking electric guitars like 1957 to 1962.
Yeah.
Or maybe even to maybe 64. Yeah, to 64 is the
golden age.
That's PAFs, that's slabboard Strats, that's the invention, the Jazzmaster, the Jaguar, the PAF Gretsch Filtertron,
right?
Like Epiphone getting absorbed into Gibson, and the Casino and the Cornet, the ES335, all of that stuff. There was just something happening right around that time, where there was some pretty epic guitar minds between Fender and Gibson and Gretsch that were driving that ship that we're all still chasing after.
What was the best guitar you saw come through that shop?
Oh God, that's so subjective, but yeah.
But to you, like the one that you saw that just blew your mind.
Amos,
yeah,
the Carina V that we sold Joe. I love Carina guitars, and I've got to play. We have a 58 here at the building.
I've heard tale of this 58.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet, but
anytime I have an opportunity to sneak away, I'll go play that. But no, I really love Carina guitars. There was a Banner Southern Jumbo that I played that was on Guitar of the Day at some point. I sold to my friend Scott, that you just hit like a G chord on it and it sounded like you've split the heavens open. It was just like, there's the really good stuff. But I mean, I've played, I think 3 Hendrix guitars. I played Albert King's Carina V. I played Albert King's Lucy V. I got my hands on some pretty cool stuff through that whole opportunity,
So I'm interested in this question too with the vintage stuff. Like we were just talking about, there's that golden era of guitars that are highly desirable and probably will be highly desirable
forever. No,
forever.
That stuff is never gonna go away.
What do you think is made today that is easily accessible today that will be highly sought after in the coming 50 years?
I don't know, man. It's hard to, it's all speculation. I don't know. Everything is made in such higher quantities now. And to be honest, I'm not as hip to a lot of the boutique builders anymore now that I'm out of the game. But I know like at Novo and some of those companies that you work with, I know they make killer guitars. Mm-hmm. It's just I don't know. I'm a fan of the classics, so that's where I always end up gravitating towards.
Right.
And humbuckers are my sound. I mean, P90s, and I like flat bowl tele pickups.
Right.
I'm not a big Strat guy.
Not either.
For some reason, I get it. It's an incredibly versatile instrument. It's just my sound is not in that guitar.
Yeah.
It's definitely not in a Jaguar either.
Yeah.
That sound. I mean, I love the look of those guitars with the chrome and especially in the colors, and they're so bitchin' looking, and it's just, man, I can't get a sound to save my life out of one of those.
It's weird. I
guitars.
feel the same way about Strats in that, well, I'm a huge Hendrix fan. I picked up a guitar as a kid.
I'm a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. I played a Strat through when I was doing blues stuff. I always did it, and then it just, for some reason, it never translated to anything else for me other than Texas style blues guitar playing.
When I play a Strat, I just want it to be a Tele.
Yeah, I'll play a Tele I'll play an Esquire all day long. Yeah. Like I pretty much never go off of the bridge pickup on a Telecaster.
Yeah, speaking of that, in Novo, I've got this new Novo in the in the car right now. Actually, it's their new Solus, and it's a single pick, like tele pickup kind of Esquire thing, and it is a ringer, man.
I'll take any single pickup guitar from any manufacturer.
You only need one.
Les Paul Jr., Esquire, Gretsch 6119, the pre-Tennessean, just the red with the one Filtertron, PAF Filtertron in the bridge.
There's something badass.
Firebird 1. Yeah, dude, absolutely.
About seeing a guitar with just one pickup and seeing somebody use that on stage. It's like, okay, I don't know what it is, but there's just something that says like, yeah, he only needs the one.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah, you see those old pictures of Eddie with the burst with the neck pickup ripped out of it.
Yeah.
Neck pickup for playing rock and roll, man. I'm not.
I know. Well, and I learned watching like Phil X back in the day on those Fretted Americana videos. One of the things I remember is him. He'd be on a Junior or something, and he would always say, "Like, look, you can make this sound like a neck pickup. Well, you just roll the tone back and then pick closer to the neck, and you got a pseudo neck pickup. It's fine. You only need the one."
Yeah.
So, that's awesome, man. So what do you think in the vintage stuff, for players? So I'm not a collector. I can't pay for collector prices on like a 64 335.
That's why I play custom shop. I have my taste level of what I like and my income level have yet to cross. There's not going to be any bursts or 57 gold tops or PAF 335s in my immediate future.
Actually, I'm gonna pivot off of that question because you just brought up the burst. Why is 58, 59, 60? What is it about the bursts that makes them so desirable?
Well, it starts with artists. All of my favorite guitar players played those. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But it's not just like, oh, I got to get one because they played it. They played them, but that's the sound on all of those records that I love.
Yeah,
are that. So it's not just that they played them. That's the tone of all of my favorite records. And then the Sunburst Les Pauls were a massive flop
at the time.
Yeah, that was just a complete and total flop,
which is mind-boggling to think about today.
Yeah. So there's only, 1,600 to 1,700 were made. There's about 1,900 accounted for, but there is only about 1,700 made. Mm-hmm. So then you get the guitar that everybody wants, and then there's only that many of them, and that's simple. That's simple supply and demand right there.
Right.
But do I think the ones we produce now are every bit as good? Yeah. I do, if you just close your eyes and whatever. However, when you've played a couple, right?
I've played one burst, 159, and it didn't blow me away. And that's the thing. It's like
there's a lot of variables on a guitar that's that old.
Yeah.
What's the pickup still putting out at? Does it have any frets left on it?
Right.
And then you get into the whole, oh God, I can't refret it.
Right.
Because then I kill all the value. And it's like there's a lot of benefits to playing great new guitars.
Right.
Or to go back to your other thing, are they going to be as collectible and in the prices? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of advantages to I know the pot's not going to take a shit mid-set when I go to roll back the volume and
Oh, and by the way, you can't replace that pot because if you do,
that strikes $20,000 off the price.
And that to me is why I don't have that collector's mindset. I'm a player and I want something if I'm going to buy that. And that's why I respect the hell out of guys like Jason Isbell, who just bought the Red Eye from Carter. He takes that thing out and plays it, man.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's what it was made to do. They weren't really made to be, cherished. And I mean, look, man, there's still classical violinists that are playing Stradivarius violins that are hundreds of years old and worth millions and millions of dollars, but they're still being played. And I think
they sound really great. And that's ultimately at the end of the day, the whole idea. Yeah, I understand collecting and I understand value and stuff. And one of the things I always tried to sell home to customers when I was dealing with is like, dude, if it needs frets, put fucking frets on it.
Yeah.
Like, there's far worse things that you can do to a guitar than put frets on it.
Right.
And in our lifetime, as we get older, dude, all of this stuff is going to have to be refretted.
Oh yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's like a cap, like doing a cap job on an old amp.
Right.
Like, it's like changing the oil in a car. Like, dude, some of this basic maintenance stuff has to be done. Will it affect the value? Yes. Do I give a shit? Not really. Because if you can't play it, it's fucking worthless.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
That's my opinion on that.
I completely agree. I was talking to Tilly about that the other night. I forget what we were looking at, but there was I saw something that came up and on YouTube, and somebody was playing a guitar that was just obscenely expensive, and they were just touting about, oh, it's completely original, it's never been touched, and all the frets and everything are original. I was like, dude, I've played those old guitars, and half of them play like garbage because what little frets there were when they were new are completely gone. And it would be like if you bought like a vintage Ferrari and you paid whatever $10 million for a Ferrari, and it still had the original tires on it from like 1963. People would, oh, you can't put new tires on it because it's going to ruin the value. Well, that's the way I see the guitar stuff. It's like, buy it, play it, and you
got to also remember, like, unlike Les Paul Customs too, the fretless Wonder guitars, and people go, why the hell would they do that? You got to remember, back then, everybody was still kind of using flat wounds on everything.
Yeah,
like the big, huge, bendy guitar stuff really hadn't caught on yet. People were still playing chord melody changes and doing super fast single note runs. There was like the huge Hendrixy 2.5 step bends and stuff. That was the frets less like, because that if you put flat wounds on them and you start, like, you go, oh yeah, I get it. Or like on a Jazzmaster, the strings won't stay in the saddle. Oh, put 13 gauge flat wounds on it, which is how it shipped. And you go, oh dude, no, I get it. It does kind of work, but you're going to string it up with 9s, round wound strings, and you hit it, and the strings pop out of the saddle. And what were they thinking? It's like, well, that wasn't what they were thinking.
Yeah, Yeah,
that's it. It was the 50s or the early 60s, and you have to understand that, like, it wasn't, guitar playing at that point was not what it is
right
now.
So what would you point somebody towards who is, they've got a little bit of money to spend, but they're a player and they want something vintage for the feel and, all of the quote unquote mojo that a vintage guitar has, but they, aren't a collector. What do you think are some like the best buys in the vintage world today?
Acoustics for starters. Like, you could go get yourself a great J45 or J50 that's in good condition with great frets on it, still a good neck angle and geometry and all that stuff for, $5,000 or less. And that's a lifer.
Yeah.
That's something that you'll play on every record for the rest of your career. You'll sit around the house and play. You think, yeah, you might not want to stick a pickup in it and take it on the road, but like, that'll be a workhorse for you. The electric guitars get a little bit tougher, but yeah, like a Beat Les Paul Jr.
Yeah.
Or, a later 60s SG or ES 335. Those are lifer kind of guitars.
Right.
Unfortunately, with a lot of the Fender stuff, like the 70s Strats are not necessarily, if you're going to spend that money, I'd tell you to go buy one from the custom shop.
Right.
The 60s stuff is still fairly unattainable for most.
Well, there's that
mortals,
that window of time. So one of my close friends in Atlanta, he's a bass player, and he has a 66 P bass that was refinished, total like player grade, but it's a ringer.
66 for Fender is a really great year
because it's post CBS, but they were using a lot of the bodies.
They did not throw everything away.
Yeah,
when they took over, so that's all the same kind of necks and bodies and whatever pickups were left over, and it's like 66 for Fender is a great year to get deals.
Right.
But yeah, anything pre-CBS, man, you're gonna have to pay for it.
Man.
Which, sucks. But
yeah.
That's
Right. That's the market.
Hey,
That's
they're good for a reason, and that's why everybody spends a lot of money for them.
Well, and I like the comments and stuff. You know, is this worth that much money, or no guitar is worth that? And it's like, well, technically it is, because somebody is going to pay that much money for that guitar. So, you know, it is worth whatever people will pay for it.
There's like, if like the best of a new, like one of the say a 60th anniversary 59 Les Paul, there's $6,500. It's still a lot of money, but when a real one is $300,000, you go, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. For somebody like a Bonamassa or somebody who's really into that thing, that guitar might get them 90% there. But when that's your craft and that's your thing, that extra 10% is a really, really big deal.
Yeah.
And that extra 10% might be worth $250,000 more to you when you walk out on stage to have that thing, because it mentally takes you there or spiritually takes you there or puts you into that zone. So, yeah, I mean, first off, people commenting on this stuff, one, have either probably never seen one, let alone played one, let alone could tell the difference or know what that, you know. But the one thing about the old guitars, 'cause you said you played the one and you weren't incredibly blown away. There is an aura around them that when you see it and you hold it up and start to play one, like everything kind of changes. There's a different dynamic between player and instrument, because you're a little bit more reverent of what it is that you're holding.
Right.
Is that worth it? I don't know.
It's a subjective thing.
You shouldn't ask if it's worth it if you can't afford it. If you can afford it, then you start to ask yourself, is it worth it?
Yeah.
And the answer to obviously a lot of guys is, yeah,
Right.
it is. That extra 10% is, this is my craft and these are my tools, and that extra 10% is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a good point, man.
Yeah. Everybody's got opinions on how money should be spent, but you know.
Well, and the internet is full of opinions.
And if I was a plastic surgeon and there was the one machine that was $1 million that got me 90% of the way there, and then there was the $2 million machine that gave me that extra 10%, and being a surgeon,
right,
and reconstructing people's faces and stuff, like, yeah, like, dude, I'll maybe that extra $1 million for that extra little 10%, because this is my craft,
right,
is worth it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't sell vintage guitars anymore, so I'm not here to try and convince anybody. I'm just trying to.
Well, you're not going to convince me because I can't afford.
Again, we shouldn't be having the conversation because we can't afford it. It's not for us to decide whether or not it's worth the money.
Right. You're absolutely right. I'm not in the market for a 59 burst, unfortunately.
I'm not either.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about the transition to Gibson, like the last, what has it been? Year and a half?
No, it's been 10 months.
Not even a year.
It has not been a year.
Jesus Christ.
It's been a long 10 months.
It's been a long 10 months.
Yeah.
So kind of how's it been from your perspective, coming in and sort of taking over from what was, which, I mean, look, you saw my video, the WTF Gibson video. I still stand by everything I said.
Oh yeah. No, I wouldn't question anything.
I mean, where this company was, 2 years ago, 24 months ago, was, I think it's on a completely different track now. So from your perspective, like, what has it been like, kind of coming into Gibson and trying to turn it around?
Well, for starters, I will take absolutely zero credit for anything that has been done here. There's a think tank of absolutely brilliant guitar minds in this building that I'm only one of, and I'm not necessarily on that side. That's not my job, but I do, hang in product development meetings, and I do make my voice heard, and I, say stuff. But dude, Cesar knows what he's doing, and Matt Kaler is absolutely brilliant guitar nerd.
Right.
That I'm happy to know that he's helping to steer the ship as well. But I mean, like, dude, I love all guitars, but this brand and this company held a very big spot in my heart, and like to be a part of it is like, I'm still in awe of it sometimes, that I'm here. And when I was talking to JC and Cesar, when we were still working out the details, whether I was going to do it or not, and all that stuff. And Cesar said, like, we are about to write the next chapter of this story, and the new golden era of this company, and I want your name to be in the history book with ours, like Ted McCarty's name is in that book. And like, it's like, oh shit, yeah, no, like, I'm in, dude.
Big responsibility.
Dude, it is a lot of pressure sometimes, especially I'm not, like I said, the product guy.
Yeah.
I give my opinions on products. Everything I'm doing is like stuff that has to, when Gibson TV launched last month, it's like I finally felt like I started working
right
here that week. It was 10 months of me showing up going like, dude, what is my point? Like, I couldn't talk about what I was doing. We'd go film stuff, and then it'd be done, and then we didn't release it because we were waiting to get all this stuff together. So it was a lot of, and I'm working on some other stuff that will be revealed later this summer. So like, everything I'm doing is not necessarily public facing.
Right.
And everybody, speculating what it is that I do, and, and then not knowing how people are going to react to it, and if they like it, and if I'm doing the right things, or, it was a really long 10-month transition trying to figure out what it is I do.
So we should clarify, like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here,
What
man?
do you do? So, it would be easier to explain if I could tell you the second half, but it's coming.
Okay.
But content filled my time, and that's how the Gibson TV thing started. And I had a fairly clear idea of what I wanted that to be. And I mean, we talked about this 6-7 months ago when you were at the showroom in LA, and just trying to figure out what I want the future of guitar content to look like.
Yeah.
And then sitting down, and basically my job is to make all of my stupid childhood, teenage, boyhood dreams become reality somehow, and they let me do that for a living. It's kind of nuts that I get to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, content is only half of the equation.
You can't talk about the other
I'll
half
talk
yet?
to you about it, but I can't do it.
Okay, not publicly?
Yeah,
not yet.
Publicly, yeah.
Okay.
You'll know,
Yeah.
when it's coming.
So overall, it's been a solid transition. You feel like where the company is headed is...
Oh, dude, from the product side, I mean, look, to be honest, we still have areas to improve. We still have brands to develop. We own like some incredible names that we haven't had time to focus on yet because there's so much other...
Right.
Like, we own Dobro. Like, and we're doing nothing with that. Like, Dobro is like Kleenex. That's one of those, you just... Oh, look at that Dobro over there.
Right.
And it's like, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it. And in the flood, a lot of the tooling and stuff was destroyed. And it's like, how much time and effort do we spend rebuilding that brand while we still are rebuilding everything
Well,
Gibson is priority.
We should clarify the flood. Was it 10 years ago now? Nashville,
it's been 10 years.
Flooded, literally flooded. And the Gibson factory is basically right on the river.
On the river.
And so Gibson at the time was, how many feet of water was in that building?
I've heard, different people's stories, but yeah, the whole entire probably bottom 6 feet of the warehouse was a river.
Yeah.
And, all of that production of banjos, mandolins, and stuff was all at Opry Mills Mall. There was that kind of like little Gibson store that had the production in there, and all of that flooded out, and all of the machines and tooling went with it, which is why you saw those Steinberger gearless tuners on Firebirds for a while, because the banjo tuner
tooling was gone. Wow.
And no, we made those for banjos, but yeah, they went on Firebirds too. But like were gone.
Yeah. Well, so
and then Kramer, we still have Kramer, which was the #1 guitar brand in 1987. It was bigger than Gibson. It was bigger than Fender. It was bigger than anything.
Right.
That was the #1 brand. It's an iconic brand in that marketplace, which is a huge percentage of the guitar market.
Right.
That we're just now starting to get enough bandwidth around to go, dude, what can we really do with this brand?
Yeah.
That's as iconic as Gibson is, just in that sector of the market.
Yeah.
Or at least was. How do we resurrect this brand and make it great again?
So I've been pretty public about my feelings towards this brand and towards the company and towards you.
So have I.
And you guys.
And I have too before I started.
And the thing is, I love Gibson guitars. Like when I got out of music school 10 years ago, my dream guitar was a 335. And there's just something about the guitars and the people that played them, and the bands that I grew up listening to. There's something about Gibson, and the thing that I, like a lot of other people, were really frustrated about for a really long time, which is watching over the last 10 years the company make these ridiculous decisions. Robot tuners, the Firebird X, then the 2019 Les Paul Standard with the dip switches. That was all that stuff. I've made my point clear on that one. Yeah. So overall, as kind of having a unique perspective as someone who's on the outside, but also looking on the inside, I'm encouraged to see where you guys are going, even through over the last, some will say you guys have had a little bit of a rocky start with things like the Play Authentic thing and, the video of the guitars the Firebird X's getting run over. Is from my perspective, I don't necessarily think there was going to be that smooth of a transition anyways to when you guys took over, but
it was too smooth. Everybody, everything was going really, really great, I think, and people still hate Gibson pretty much, and that's that comes with the whole thing. So I think anybody was looking for anything to latch on to hate on again,
right?
Which is that's all, dude. That's part of the gig. I don't get caught up in that.
Well.
That stuff.
I mean, the Play Authentic thing it felt odd just from my perspective. I didn't really see the point behind it when you guys put it out.
Yeah.
Is there what happened with that?
I mean, in order to be able to keep your trademarks, you have to make an effort to inform the public of what your trademarks are. So if it ever does happen to be that you have evidence of showing that to people. Now, that video was about counterfeit guitars, which I think since that came out, we've shut down over 50,000 websites and I'm talking about guitars that say Gibson.
Right.
Coming from China. Coming from some Alibaba server on, Chinese website, and you get it and it looks just like a Gibson. Then you go to make a truss rod adjustment and you take the bell cover off and it's got foam shoved in there.
I've heard about these, and they have like actual serial numbers too.
Yeah, I'm
right?
not talking about Gibsons. I'm talking about guitars that say Gibson on the headstock, have a Gibson serial number on the back of it, have a Made in USA. We can't have those in the marketplace.
Right.
Not because we can't have fans of our brand getting duped into buying a counterfeit product. We can't have those trading in the marketplace.
Yeah.
We've shut down over 50,000 websites selling counterfeit Gibson product.
Right.
Now, the Dean lawsuit was 2 years before we took over. And then when that, people started to kind of misunderstand the video. And then the next Monday, the Dean lawsuit came out. And then the whole entire perception of what the situation was shifted to that.
Yeah.
Which was, something that you can't change the perception once it becomes reality. And,
right.
And the other thing is wisdom I've picked up from some of the guys who've been in these situations before is like, there is no reasoning with an angry mob.
Yeah.
You can't reason with an angry mob. You can't try to explain yourself again, or you can't, so you just, you sit there and take it, which is what I did. You know? You sit there and take it, the tone came out wrong or whatever, and people misunderstood it. And, but I mean, the point of the video was to spread awareness about trademarks. So, I mean, in a way,
you did.
It kind of did exactly what it was supposed to do, in a weird, dark, twisted way.
I mean, I don't know that I would. Worked. I don't know that I would call that video like an overall success.
I'm not using the word success. I'm just saying, in a twisted, roundabout way. It opened up a discussion about trademark infringement in this industry when there's like every industry in the world goes through this stuff every day. Now, should it have been handled in the public forum? No, it probably shouldn't have. But then again, the whole point was to inform the public. So it's like you walk this weird line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the perception, at least from what I saw, because I got a bunch of hate from it as well at the time.
Sorry, dude.
It's not, I don't care. Look, I make the choice to be on the internet and to share my public opinion. It's, anytime you put something out on the internet, a video, a podcast, whatever, you have to kind of accept that okay, you're stepping into the game, and people are going to share their opinions and their comments on, your video and and forums and, Instagram or wherever. It still sucks to be on the receiving end of all that stuff, but it is what it is. And so my perception of it at the time was, it kind of felt out of left field. It was like you guys had just come out of, taking over the company, and the messaging that I saw, and I think a lot of other people saw, was you guys were going after like boutique builders. And then the Dean lawsuit dropped, and it just looked like the new Gibson was just going to be going after anybody and everyone that was doing any kind of Les Paul,
like I said,
Flying V or whatever.
That was the messaging came out wrong, and that's on me for not making it clear enough. But again, we had the idea of what it was, and you get one person, and you know how it works. You get the one comment, and then that starts the thread, and then all of a sudden that's the first comment that everybody sees, and then everything snowballs from there. I mean, look, I moved my family here. The moving truck showed up on a Tuesday, and we started unloading our stuff, and on Thursday, that is when that video came out. So I had just moved my wife and my two kids. They had been living at my parents' house in Ohio for weeks because it was the summer and trying to get a truck from LA. So like finally all this stuff happens. We finally get everybody there. And it was 48 hours after my family arrived here that whole thing started going down. Welcome to Nashville, babe. It was that definitely made the transition a little bit harder too. But again, it's if you're going to be on the internet, man,
I mean, you're kind of stepping into that lion's den when you do that.
We were 4th of July. I was at Bonamassa's, a penthouse downtown. And he's like, bring the family over on barbecue. Like the fireworks are like, you walk out on this thing and it's like, oh, there's the fireworks right there. So I brought the kids over there and stuff, and he pulled me aside and gave me some, it'll go away eventually, And I embrace it now. Somebody sent me this SG body painted with my face on it and stuff. It's like it's just become part of the thing, man. I don't give a shit.
Well, the thing about it is, man, with this brand, people, again, they've seen the last 10 years of Gibson sort of transitioning into this brand that, for lack of a better term, has kind of become the butt of a lot of jokes and things online.
There is plenty of ammunition for that.
That's not going to change overnight. Like, you guys have a responsibility to make the guitars way better than they were, which to be honest, I think you are.
We're on that track. We're definitely on the right track on that.
Like the quality control needs to be better than it was, which from what I've seen and played, I think it is. And I think just my advice or perspective is just for the next 5 years, make kick-ass guitars that people can afford and that they can play, that they can talk about, and to undo the last 10 years of...
Yeah, it takes a long time for public... I mean, I read all the comments, man.
Yeah.
I always read the comments. I go through and read everything.
Might not be the greatest for your mental health.
That's all right.
I've had to stop reading comments.
I can deal with it. But like, people think we still put robot tuners on guitars.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
People still have, whatever perceptions of 3 years ago when they were in Guitar Center and picked something up off the wall that's, all we can do is, like you said, all we can do is continue to make the highest quality product that we can make, and people will eventually catch on that it's not what it was.
Yeah.
And we lowered the prices.
Yeah.
Across the board, we lowered the prices on everything.
Yeah.
Inflation adjusted from 1959's price, like what a Les Paul cost in 1959, if you adjust for inflation, is $24.99, which is what it is.
Yeah.
And you've been to the factory, you've seen it. That's why when I had the idea for The Process, which is on Gibson TV, one of the shows, it's like, we need to do a new factory tour video. It's like, no, we need to do an epic 14-part cinematic 4K look at the thing, because when people go see the factory in person, we don't do a public tour because we just, again,
you can't.
We can't.
Yeah.
There's not enough everything to handle that. But when artists like yourself or somebody comes in and do it, when they get to the end, they go, holy shit.
Yeah.
I had no idea that many pairs of hands touch it, that much, that they rope bind by hand, there's a whole room full of women with razor blades who scrape every piece of binding by hand, because that's the only way to do it.
And that's not the custom shop.
That is USA. That is good old-fashioned Gibson USA. And to try and break that down so when people get done watching that series that they feel like I gave them the tour was the idea of that. And getting some of the men and women who make the guitars involved, and because they are a very passionate group of people, that this is not an assembly line manufacturing job to these people. No matter what their job at the factory is, they have an extreme amount of pride and passion for the products that we make. And when you get there and you see them and you talk to them and you hear them speak, you get it. So that was kind of the idea behind that whole series. And I think people are are starting to see it. I mean, episode 5 came out yesterday. We still got another month and a half or 2 months to tell that whole story.
Yeah. The thing that you're doing really well, because I've watched 2 or 3 of them at this point, and the thing that I noticed is you are highlighting the actual people. Like, you're pulling the workers off the line and setting them up on an interview and getting them to talk about what they do and why they do it. And this is something that I think all of us, myself included, are guilty of. You know, you look at any kind of product, a guitar, an amp, a pedal, and it's so easy to just literally just objectify that thing and look at it as an object and say, oh, this is great, or oh, this thing sucks. And then that, for me, and in the past, has caused me to sort of forget. It's like, oh no, these are actual like people making. It's not like they push a button and, you know, at Fender or Gibson or whoever, and this guitar just pops out and they slap a price tag on it and send it to the store. Okay. It's like, no, there's you know, dozens of hands that this thing passes through, and those are people's jobs and their livelihood, and they take pride in that. And that was when I got to go to the factory for the first time last May. You know, that was something that I saw and put it into perspective, where it's like, oh yeah, this is like a real thing with real people here actually doing this. And
yeah,
you know,
it's yeah. And like I said, a lot of pride over there for the people that work there. There are people that have been there 20 years. There are people that have been there 30 years. There's 5 or 6 people there that are in the 40-year club.
Yeah.
That over half of their life has been spent in that factory doing that and fighting for the cause. Like, if you don't think these people care or are passionate about what they're doing, like, you better think again.
Yeah.
You know?
It's great. And, you know, again, I think you guys have an uphill battle ahead of you to fight, but
always,
I mean, make really good guitars that people can afford, and I think you'll be in a good place.
Yeah.
So
we have models now starting at $999, made in America with lacquer finish. They get a Plek treatment. Like, that's, I mean, we can't make Les Paul standards $999, and when you're done watching the process, you'll see why.
Right.
There's too much labor that has. I mean, it can't cost that.
Yeah.
You know, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But we can make a great guitar for $1,000, and we are. And you know, that gets the same $500 Plek treatment that you'd have to. What's a Plek cost by you? I don't know who you have. You have
it's
a
like
Plek.
$230. If I get that wrong, Righteous is going to be upset. But yeah, it's a couple $100.
Okay, so it's come down a little bit on the after, because when I was first heard about Pleks in LA, it was like $600-700
right.
to have. There was one store in town that had one Plek machine and
right.
like get it done. But like that's something that you would have to go spend a lot of money after the market. That's on
everything.
If it says Gibson, it's 3 things. It was made in America. It's got a lacquer finish, and it was Pleked.
Yeah.
You know, that's, I think, some serious value added on a guitar that's $999.
Yeah. Well, dude, thanks for coming on, man.
Dude,
it's been great.
Always love to sit around and talk guitars.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll probably have to do it again.
As soon as we turn off the camera, we're going to sit here and keep talking about guitars.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So there you go. That was my sit down with Mark. I think it was interesting hearing his perspective on the whole thing. You know, I should clarify, when I said that I got hate for it, I got hate for not jumping on the bandwagon of bashing Gibson and the whole Play Authentic thing when it happened. And I guess maybe some of that is fair, because in the past I had jumped on the bandwagon of bashing Gibson with the 2019 Les Paul, and you know, I'm sure some of you have seen that video on my channel. But when it first went down, I was mostly just kind of confused. And like I said to Mark, it felt kind of out of left field for me. So it was interesting hearing the actual reasoning behind it, even though it was not executed super well. I think, you know, it's a good thing to be shutting down counterfeit, you know, Gibsons. Guitars that are being sold with real serial numbers to people that think they're buying an actual Gibson. Like, that's not okay. Again, the messaging probably should have been better. But, I think they've learned their lesson, and I'm a Gibson fan. Aside from the current people that are running it, I want to see that company succeed. I love those guitars. And, I think all they need to do for the next 5 years is concentrating on building the best guitars that they can at an affordable price, an accessible price for people to get into playing guitar. And I think they do that by focusing on the USA brand, getting that back up and running, which for the record, I think they're doing a great job with, and getting the Epiphone brand as good as it can be, which again, for the record, I think they're doing. So overall, I'm excited about the future of that company. I think those people are the right people for the job. I think, JC and Cesar and Mark have a pretty clear vision of where they want to take that company. And personally, as a guitar player and someone that loves Gibson guitars, I'm excited to see what they can do with the company over the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that discussion. There's going to be a place for comments in the show notes on my website. So if you want to, you can leave comments there. I'm definitely not trying to restart this whole play authentic debate and controversy thing. Quite frankly, I feel like Mark, who was the face of all that stuff, I feel like he's been through enough with all of it. Again, my point was just to share his perspective and to hear his perspective on it. But if you're interested in leaving your thoughts on it, you can do that on my website. I'm reworking the podcast page to try and have like a place for comments and engagement and all that kind of stuff. So that's rhettshull.com. Under the podcast page. You can check it out there. On to the final segment of the show, the listener submitted original song. I'm really excited about this. Again, this is sponsored by DistroKid. So again, DistroKid is a service that lets you publish your own original music easily and quickly to just about any and all streaming platform. That's Spotify, Apple Music. I believe they do YouTube Music as well. Pandora. Basically, it's one set place where you can essentially publish your music all across the internet, and it's a flat fee starting at $19.99 a year. That's really cool, actually, that they don't take a cut off the top. That's just a flat rate. And if you use the sign-up code distrokid.com/VIP/Rhett, you will get 7% off your first year's membership. So that's really cool. Like I said, I'm actually going to be using DistroKid here in the near future when I finally start to release some stuff that I've been working on, both on my own and with my friend Jamie Portier, who I actually need to have on the podcast. He's been on the channel a few times, but Jamie's a cool guy. So we'll be using DistroKid for that. And like I said, they're sponsoring this segment. So basically what this is, if you're new here, every week I take an original song submitted by you, one of the listeners. If you want to submit a song, send a downloadable track, not a YouTube link, not a Spotify link, a piece of music I can actually download to the email address backstagejournalpod@gmail.com. And include a little bit of a write-up on it. Include, why you wrote it, who you wrote it with, how you recorded it, maybe what gear you used to write it with. So this week's original song submission comes from Brennan White, who actually I think was last week's voicemail. So Brennan submitted a song. He said, "So this is the first song in a recent single I put out called First Steps of a Lifetime. It's literally about how I had a dream about an ex-girlfriend 2 years after we broke up, and how even that subconscious reminiscing got me thinking about all the good and bad stuff that left a mark on the person I am today." It's pretty heavy. "I recorded, produced, mixed, played all the stuff myself except the drums because my friend Bobby is much better than me. And I'm super proud of it and also what this next album is going to sound like." So it looks like the band name is Codetta South, which you can find them on all social media under that name, Codetta South. And so without further ado, this is the original song for episode 2. Thanks everyone for listening. Like I said, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe on your podcast streaming service of choice, and I will see you guys next week.
The night is dark. can only weigh you down. The moon is dead, a new one's yet to shift the tide and pull you out. In better days, you celebrate by locking all your doors. Yet here you are, a victim of the very fate you tried to warn. Is this how it starts? It's coming around. Nothing for it Ouroboros, the beast that you found could tear you to pieces, could be just what you needed now. Let it go, tooth and claw, unhinge your jaw, swallow your pride and move